fired at Louisville. Louisville has a press conference set for 1 o'clock Eastern time today. The news comes a day after the school confirmed it's part of a federal investigation into fraud and corruption in recruiting, in which assistant coaches from Arizona, Auburn, Oklahoma State, and USC have been charged. Louisville was separately investigated by the NCAA for a 2015 sex for pay scandal, currently under sanctions for that. You see Tom Jurich there. Again, he was fired. We are hearing it is now official. So Jurich is out, and also Rick Pitino, after 16 seasons there at Louisville, led the Cardinals to 28 NCAA tournament wins, 3 Final Fours, and, of course, the national title in 2013. But apparently this is the final straw for Rick Pitino at the school. Let's bring in our basketball insider, Jeff Goodman, now. All right, Jeff, tell us how this went down this morning at the University of Louisville.
Well, first it was Tom Jurich, the athletic director, meeting with the interim president at Louisville, and then Rick Pitino went over from the facility over and met with the interim president as well, and both were let go from their positions. And I mean, the amazing part of all this right now is how quickly this whole situation has escalated. And my sources tell me that, listen, this is the first big name that we're seeing Rick Pitino, but who knows what else this FBI investigation can bring, because they've got 10 people that they've arrested that haven't really talked to the FBI in depth, and they could certainly roll on other people, big names, whether it's shoe company people, whether it's agents, whether it's college coaches. So everybody right now is scared within the coaching fraternity because they don't know who's next, what's next, because it's no longer the NCAA, which instilled little to no fear. Now it's the FBI, in which you've got wiretaps, in which you've got subpoena power, all these things that they can't just skirt as they did with the NCAA.
Jeff, the allegations against a Louisville staffer are that he and others helped funnel $100,000 to a recruit. In a vacuum, would that alone have been enough to cost Pitino his job, or was this an accumulation of offenses that got him?
You know, I think it's an accumulation more than anything else. I think if it were just this, it certainly wouldn't have happened this quickly. You know, you would have let the investigation play out a little bit and see what happened. But you're still dealing with the stripper scandal, you know, and you've got the extortion situation a few years ago with the extramarital affair. So this is strike 3 for Rick Pitino, and a large population of the Louisville constituents, they wanted him gone after the stripper scandal. So he had kind of run out of favor. Again, there was a change in administration. There's an interim president right now, and they had just felt like the board and the president felt like enough was enough.
Jeff, Rick Pitino, of course, wildly successful on the court, 770 career wins, a couple national titles, the 7 Final Fours. When you write the first paragraph of his career, what goes in there?
Now it's all the scandals. I mean, listen, what do we remember? We remember the recent past. And recent right now is everything that's happened to him off the court, not on the court. I think in time, you can start to remember more of the Hall of Fame career, what a great coach he was. And you can't take that away. I mean, he was a great X's and O's college basketball coach. But ultimately, right now, we're remembering what just happened at the 11th hour, and that's this situation built on also the stripper scandal and the extortion. And those were sensational. Those were certainly more recent.
So when you look at college basketball history, can you remember a downfall as precipitous as the one we're seeing right now with Rick Pitino?
No, not from a coach. I mean, you know, there have been incredible, you know, scandals. The Baylor basketball scandal years ago. I mean, Todd Bozeman back at Cal, but nothing like Rick Pitino. I mean, this is one of
are they going to do this? How are they going to get a basketball coach and a staff together in such a short period of time?
You know, it's a great question. I mean, I don't know what they do now in terms of do you hold over, you know, one of the assistant coaches, David Padgett, who played at Louisville, would probably be the most likely and work with these kids in the interim until they bring somebody else in. Who makes the decision? Again, Jurich is gone. You know, you're going to probably hire a search firm. And a search firm maybe is in charge of finding the next coach. And certainly right now there's just practices. But what do you do with the players? They've already, you know, they're well into their semester. Do you let them transfer? I mean, how do you transfer and stay eligible if you're already a month into the semester? So there's a lot of questions to be answered right now. But this Louisville team was one that I think presently constituted has a chance to go to the Final Four this year. They're talented. They're experienced. They lost Donovan Mitchell, but they've got enough to make a deep run in March again, notwithstanding all the issues that are going around the program right now. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Jeff Goodman, our college basketball insider, giving us a lot of insight into a really shocking day in college hoops. Again, Rick Pitino is out, and so is the AD, Tom Jurich, there at Louisville. You take a look at Rick Pitino. For all the brilliance he has as a basketball coach, he has had his issues off the court. In 2009, he was the target of an extortion attempt, eventually had to acknowledge under oath to having an extramarital affair. Then, of course, this year the NCAA handed down sanctions after it said he failed to monitor a member of his staff in relation to accusations made by a former escort back in 2015. And the news, of course, breaking yesterday about Louisville being part of the federal probe, and that apparently is the last straw for Rick Pitino there at the University of Louisville.
All right, so Reese Davis, host of College Game Day, joins us now here on Coast to Coast. Listen, I'm listening to everyone speak on this and weigh in, and the sentiment is this, Reese, and help me out. This is just the beginning in terms of this scandal. Louisville, the first to go down, but put this in perspective for us, because from my understanding, they're under the impression, and these are the people who are reporting on the story, that there are more chips that may be falling after this. Put this in perspective for us.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, you saw assistant coaches from several other programs who were listed yesterday when the news broke. I think there's a sentiment that certainly these guys weren't the only ones, and anecdotally, while not necessarily in the legal complaint or the complaints that will probably lead to charges here in the fraud investigation, this was just sort of the manner of doing business in college basketball. Some of the coaches I've talked to have said that they would be surprised if some of the assistant coaches named yesterday were even aware that they were violating the law. They certainly knew they were violating NCAA rules. But I think that depending on how much the FBI wants to continue to pull this thread, I think that you could see several other programs and potentially head coaches impacted by this. Who that is, we don't know for sure right now, but I think it would be a little bit naive to feel that, you know, Louisville's situation is University 6, and admittedly that they were the university listed in the FBI's report yesterday, that they were the only ones somehow, and that they somehow invented this scandal, and they're the only ones participating in this type of quid pro quo or pay for play, or however you want to look at it.
All right, so Rick Pitino out as Louisville head coach. You say it's a manner of doing business in college ball. That really puts it in perspective for us. Do you think that he'll get another job being Pitino in college basketball?
I don't.
Or is this it?
No, I don't. And look, Rick is one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport. Certainly in this generation, he has been remarkable what he did first at Providence, then at Kentucky, restoring that brand to glory, and then winning a championship and going to multiple Final Fours at Louisville. No question about that. But I think that there have been so many issues, and this one being the one that is by far, in my judgment, the most serious of all of them. The other ones sort of fell in the line either of maybe not knowing every little thing going on in your program or a personal misstep. This one is far different. This is something that I think it's reasonable to say a head coach should know about or should have been suspicious about, given the way they wound up with this five-star recruit. So I don't think that I think that this would be the end of Rick's career as a college basketball coach.
All right, we got Jay Williams on the phone, our other college basketball analyst. And look, as Reese just put it, if this is the end for Pitino, talk to me, Jay Will, about what you think his legacy will be moving forward.
Well, I'm not one of these people that like to jump the gun. I'm able to compartmentalize who Rick Pitino was as a coach, in which he's a legendary coach. And I'm also able to compartmentalize, how things were handled off the court. And when I look at the whole Louisville situation, it's almost like the Sopranos of college basketball a little bit, with George and some of the things that have happened with Pitino and football back in the day. And also, with this, the term plausible deniability is something that just keeps resonating within my mind, because from somebody who's been involved in the underbelly of how college basketball works from the time I was 23 years old, and trying to recruit players and recognizing the relationships that shoe companies and managers and agents have with coaches and how this whole thing works. The way it always works is that the head coach is always able to say, I didn't know anything about this. And you had the assistant coaches and you had the associate head coaches that had to fall on the sword. And the only thing that really bothers me about all this stuff, it's not in particular to Rick Pitino, is that the kids are the ones who are deemed ineligible. Their college tuition and their college opportunity becomes null and void. And head coaches always jobs later down the road.
All right, so Reese, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, one of the things that you think about is Jay Will talked about the impact of the shoe companies. I think in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with shoe companies wanting to develop a relationship with athletes. The problem is that we don't allow that necessarily under NCAA rules. And you even had a quote that has surfaced over the last 24 hours of Rick Pitino saying that we had to get the shoe companies out of the lives of young athletes. I think what you have to do is either find a way to make it a legal business transaction or get them out of the underbelly of the sport, to use Jay's phrase there. So I think it's an either-or proposition, but I don't think there's anything inherently evil about wanting to do business with someone that a company finds marketable. The question is, are we willing to accept that in college, and what changes will be made to allow that, or will any changes made to allow it? And also, will the federal government, will the FBI continue to be interested in this case, and will it lead to real change, or will it sort of be a mini flare-up right now, and then over the course of time we sort of go back to the way of doing business, but people are just more careful from this point forward?
Okay, look, Reese, you present really good questions, because I'm listening to what Jeff Goodman said a moment ago, and he said sarcastically that the NCAA moves relatively slow when it comes to these things, and that these coaches, again, a manner of doing business, weren't really afraid of the NCAA. So if, in fact, that is the case, how could you see any changes, or what would the changes look like moving forward now that we are now aware of this level of corruption?
It probably depends on how impactful this scandal is, and how much motivation there is, and how much impact on the bottom line there is to facilitate real change. And all of those things we won't know for a while. It's not something instantaneous. As it pertains to Jeff's statement about the NCAA slow moving, they certainly are. And I think this is a perfect example of an investigation by an agency that is equipped to do a real investigation, versus the NCAA, which really is not equipped to do that type of thing and cannot apply the same type of pressure that the government can. And you see how quickly this unfolded, and how slowly sometimes just your run-of-the-mill NCAA rules violations, the investigations occur. And I do want to point out, too, that to me this is significantly different from just some type of normal recruiting violation. A guy leaving $1,000 in a bag under a bridge for somebody to pick up. This is a little bit different than that, in my judgment.
All right, so that's Reese Davis, host of College Game Day. Louisville will have a news press conference at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll bring that to you here on ESPN. Thank you so much for joining us. David, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Carrie, we're going to stick with this story, obviously, as we move forward on Coast to Coast. One of the titans of the coaching fraternity is out. Dick Vitale's